Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on tonight's Bantha Trail. My name is Abraham.
I'm Alex.
I am Connor.
And I'm Nathan.
Alex a little bit late on the pickup there, but you know what? We're all here now, so
I forgot that we decided to go alphabetically, despite the fact that I suggested it.
it was definitely your suggestion.
Classic Alex.
So this is our very first episode of the Bantha Trails, where we like to talk about generally all things nerdy, but particularly Star Wars books, series, those sorts of things. Today's episode, we're going to go ahead and primarily focus on the Light of the Jedi book. So I was the last one to read it out of our particular group. So I guess I'm going to be the one posing the most questions. But just so it's not me talking to our listeners for, 30 minutes, what did you guys think about the book?
This one in
Alex.
particular, I thought was, I think most of the High Republic books are very good. This one's good, maybe not very good, but it's a very solid start to the opening to this era of Star Wars, the High Republic.
All right, Nate, Connor, what do you guys think?
So I have mixed feelings on it. It is a very congested book, for lack of a better term. There's just a lot going on, and I think that can sometimes discount from the book itself. Very well written and everything. The storylines in themselves are good, but I feel like it suffers from a congestion of just a lot of plot lines going on. Sometimes, at least maybe just for me, I felt I got lost in the weeds a bit.
I can definitely agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, and I would say the way I look at it is by nature of them kind of starting off in a new, for all intents and purposes, it's a new universe that has not been focused on at all. Like pretty much everything is new to us as Star Wars fans or readers in general. I feel like it has a lot to set up, and I think that it does it well.
So how do you mean by new? Because obviously for the most part, all of us at the very least, and I feel like individuals who get into the Star Wars novels are probably going to be familiar with most.
So I
Star
mean the
Wars
High
content.
Republic. I mean the High Republic specifically. So
Okay.
with this being the first foray in the High Republic saga, if you will, it has to set the stage with a lot of. I mean, there was a lot of people, reading into it from what we know of from Legends, and thinking that certain things were going to be the case, maybe. But a lot of it is, I feel like, just kind of setting the stage for what they've now developed to be. It's, a very good Star Wars story in its own right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, I mean, I can agree with all of that. Like I said, I definitely see it. It has a lot of plot threads that it goes through. Not all of them as good as the rest. With that said, though, I definitely enjoyed it. And the way that it starts off with the
hyperspace disaster.
Yeah, the hyperspace disaster was kind of weird because obviously, like, even with like the movies and the books and things like that, we never really get into much information about hyperspace, like really
As a
at
tech.
all ever.
Sure.
Yeah. So I also thought it was pretty interesting to see them go ahead and be like, hey, so this is a little bit of an explanation at the very least as to how hyperspace actually works.
Yeah. There is a book in one of the photo books. They actually kind of get even like more into it. Unfortunately, that book is definitely one of the less good Star Wars books of the High Republic. I think me and Connell having read it, it's a bit troubled by both narration and by just like kind of bad writing in general.
Yeah.
But it still gives them like interesting topics, so it's still like worth a read if you're that interested in that kind of topic.
Right. It's a book that it's out of the shadows. Is the book in question, and
Gotcha.
it's it's one where it covers interesting subjects. It has a Gungan professor, so
Yeah.
that's fun. But
Can't get enough of those Gungans.
nope. But yeah, it just does not. The writing and the narrate, because both Alex and I did the audiobooks through Audible.
Yeah.
And the quality of the
Not a
production,
sponsor.
especially in comparison to the other Star Wars books in general, the High Republic books notwithstanding, it's just exceptionally lackluster and,
Yeah.
and very disappointing.
Almost surprisingly
Okay.
so.
Oh yeah, it stands out
Okay.
in how in the sense of how meh it is.
Right. So how many, like off the top of your guys' heads, how many of the characters can you actually remember? Because like I've gotten maybe
Like named
3
characters?
or 4. Yeah.
Gotcha.
3 or 4 that like actually stick out in my head. And even then, like I really don't remember their whole name. I remember Loden, the Row guy who was like in charge of the Nihil. And that's really about it. Like I really don't remember any other
Gotcha.
characters.
To be fair, I feel like Loden and Bell all very much brought out to be like the main characters of the book. Like if they had focused more on them, it would probably be more of a understood timeline in a sense that I feel like it would have gone out a little bit better if it had focused just on them, because it also focuses a lot on them in full books. Of
Are you?
of Bell
I was gonna say, are you just-
Especially
yeah.
Bell, yeah.
Bell, I would argue, is probably the closest we have to a quote-unquote main character.
Bell
in a lot of
and
the
probably
Elzar.
Elzar, who you've kind of met, but unfortunately haven't got a whole lot of time with.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. Are you saying of the High Republic period, or
Yes.
specifically of Light? Okay, gotcha. I was about to say Elzar. I wouldn't qualify as a main character at this point. From the standpoint of Light of the Jedi.
Yeah.
But as the story progresses, absolutely,
He definitely
he's
heads
yeah,
both more that direction, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. See, I was definitely. Like when you guys said that Bell and Loden were like the main characters, I just thought you were talking about because their story was kind of the most interesting.
Yeah,
Out of all of them. Just as far as like the Nihil going and capturing that random family. Seemingly, at least early on, seemingly for no reason.
yeah.
Right.
Obviously, finding out later that it was part of a bigger plan. But how many of like the twists and turns would you guys say that you kind of would have seen coming?
I would say the only twist and turn I really easily saw coming was, how best to put this, was Loden getting captured in the end.
Yeah.
Like him not dying and instead getting captured. That was really the only plot point I clearly could see like, oh yeah, this is clearly gonna happen. But besides that, I'd say it kept itself or its cards pretty close to its whatever the phraseology is.
Yeah.
To his chest.
Yeah, that's the word. I would say, like, writing wise, it really kept you invested in the sense of being able to understand the track it was following, but not necessarily predictably, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I mean, like, I definitely saw a lot of the Nihil stuff. Like, not necessarily, I wouldn't say twists and turns necessarily, but like the fact that they're gonna betray each other. That what's his name? Ro was gonna turn on the rest of the Nihil. I definitely saw a lot of that coming pretty early on.
Okay.
But I wouldn't necessarily say that it was not bad writing or anything like that. It was just kind of like
Wasn't necessarily
Well,
mind blowing. It wasn't.
yeah, they're all talking about how they're constantly paranoid about all the others, and it's
Right.
like, well, you're literally spelling it out for us.
So I would almost argue that it was intentional writing. Like, it's really meant to say, like, how poorly structured these,
Yeah.
like, Nihil are. And Ro, this especially gets more important in the later books, is how much Ro controls them or wants to control them.
Yeah.
And he intentionally keeps them disorganized for the sake of maintaining his power.
You think so?
Definitely.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I mean, I definitely thought that they had a lot more agency initially, especially within their own groups. If only just because, I guess that's the way that was meant to be written, is that they were, you know, kind of in charge of themselves, and, you know, running their own thing. Which, once again, I absolutely have to credit to just the writing at a minimum.
Sure.
But
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's-
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I mean, Light of the Jedi. I mean, again, sets up the Nihil and the events and everything, but it's very interesting to see where the Nihil end up as the stories progress.
Yeah.
And see how Markion's like deception or almost manipulation and control of the Nihil as an organization in general. It's interesting to see like where he's ended up as a character.
Yeah. I mean, once again, like as far as the books have gone, like Light of the Jedi is the only one that I've been able to get through just yet.
Obviously, yeah.
So that's, I don't know. I'm excited to see where the story goes next. But I don't know, like Marchion Ro is just kind of like I don't know. He seems like a weird character to me.
I mean,
Not necessarily a bad character.
At the moment, I would say that he's almost intentionally, or very much intentionally, being kept like maybe mysterious at the moment. Like, you don't really know what's up with him or how like he fits in, and they keep on adding to that later on in further books.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
realistically, like, we still, at the end, where we are right now in the series, we still only know so much about Ro and his
Yeah.
past. Like, it's very, very secret, which I'm sure will hopefully come out to be a great reveal later on
I
in
mean,
the story.
it is interesting stuff. Like, they've added some stuff that I've at least found interesting, full like speculation stuff like that. But yeah, we haven't got all that much out of it, unfortunately. But I'm sure it will get into it more as they continue to write stuff for it.
And that's like as I previously mentioned, which I know you, Abraham, suffered with, where there's just a lot in this book of setup, and that sometimes just some of the context gets lost in the weed, and they have to kind of you have to really learn that stuff either on your own through the other books. So if you stopped here, you would just have no explanations for some of this stuff, which I would say the main fault of Light of the Jedi is that.
Well, I would arguably put out that like they'll kind of want you to keep reading into it, don't they? So it's a good idea to give you some kind of suspense.
Sure, but I'd say it has a bit of an issue with no real cathartic ending. It's very much like a to be continued, and I feel like it does suffer from not being treated like its own book.
That's kind of the point. It's the whole start off to the new era.
I get that. Don't get me wrong.
Do
Don't get me wrong. As I said, I just felt like there were a lot of plot lines going on, and I wish some of them would have been more completely finished in the own book instead of really forcing you to constantly go on. I love a book that sets up the next book in the series or whatever. Don't get me wrong, but it should feel a complete book on its own as well, if that makes sense. And with all the plot lines in Light of the Jedi, it sometimes feels like it's not its own book. It's like a part one to a more complete book later on.
I totally agree with you, Nate. But again, I point out that's the point. They want you to be invested. I mean, maybe you aren't invested, which is the issue. But they want you to continue on because it's the start off of a whole new era of Star Wars.
And you're
it's not fair to base it off of say just to throw a trilogy out like the Heir of the Empire. I would agree that there are plot lines in Heir of the Empire that are a lot more complete, but it's just a trilogy. It's not like to start off a whole 7, 8 books now.
That's true. I may be being a bit more harsh on it based on the fact I haven't read it in a bit. But I don't know. That was just an issue I remember feeling just not fully complete in the sense of it feeling like its own book.
Yeah, I got you.
Which I think not worded that best, where it's not like I think it's a bad book. I just feel like it really has some issues of its own identity compared to the identity of the entire series.
So I would, for the sake of illustration, I would say a good comparison, not necessarily quality-wise, but in the sense of how it's structured, is the sequel trilogy, or I guess the Skywalker saga as a whole. But the sequels in the sense of, yes, you can judge a single movie on its own, but you also need to keep in mind the bigger picture and the overall story that it furthers, rather than just judging the movie in the individual context of itself when there's more that you have to consider like that. If that makes sense.
I definitely see your point. However, I would also say that in terms of for me, right? I'm obviously going to continue reading them, but that is because we're kind of dedicating a whole podcast to it.
Right. Kind of dumb for us not to. Continue.
Right. So, but that's me personally. Whereas, someone who's just kind of getting into it, for the first time, for whatever reason, if it's not an enjoyable book, then why would they continue reading it?
Right. I gotcha.
And if they feel like it's incomplete or that there's still information that they haven't gained, yes, that might draw some to be like, oh, well, let me read the next one. But I also feel as though it's going to have some people be like, well, what's the point in reading the next one, they don't get involved enough with characters.
I would definitely say there was a lot more involvement with characters in the next one, so that's not something you should be worried about.
Yeah, Light of the Jedi, again, is there to set up this new part of the universe that we aren't familiar with yet. And I think that it does it. It's a lot. It is a lot of information. Nobody can say otherwise. But I think that it's effective in the sense, if nothing else, of keeping you engaged and not scaring you away necessarily, while remaining as complex as something like that needs to be. Like I'm, very involved in a lot of groups and just that the circle of people that would be interested in this story, and I haven't. Now I know it's not definitive, and it's the case for everybody, but I haven't ever heard of somebody who, started with Light of the Jedi and then just gave up.
Yeah.
On the High Republic. It's always
Right.
been, this one was a little much, but it's interesting and it's intriguing, and I'm interested to see where it goes, kind of thing.
I got you. Yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't ever say that, like, even with me, I say I have to continue reading. I don't have to, obviously. But if I, had less of a vested interest in reading, continuing
If you were
to read
just
the books,
passively reading on your own, for example.
right?
Yeah.
I would definitely say that I would continue reading or listening to or whatever. But it's definitely not. I wouldn't say Light of the Jedi is pulls you in and keeps you on the edge of your seat, and you're always gonna wonder what's gonna happen next.
Sure.
But I mean, like I said, that was just kind of me personally.
Gotcha.
I will give it one thing, no matter what. Like I said, I have my issues with it. Still a great book. I should clarify that. I do enjoy the book, but also, it does a great job of making you realize the stakes of what's going on. Like, earlier on with the whole hyperspace disaster, like, it's clear how many people died from that by giving you those point of views from the people that died.
Or potentially will.
Will,
There's an
Yeah.
active sense of seriousness to the situation, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Which I will give it definitely kudos for. Is it definitely makes you highly aware of the unprecedented danger that they're currently experiencing, and the millions of lives that were lost, and the billions of lives that could have been lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And had every reason to have been lost.
Yeah.
Like, just the fact that it is a very serious situation, and needing to set the stakes. I think it sets up, especially with the early chapters with the disaster itself. I think that's where they really needed to sell, it being a serious situation, and I think Charles Soule did that well.
Yes.
I'm inclined to agree.
I will say, though, the first chapter with, that it part of, what's the ship's name? Whatever the ship's name was.
The Legacy Run.
Yeah,
that's
Legacy
it.
Run. I will say that was definitely not the best written segment, which makes it sound a lot worse than it actually was. But I don't necessarily know how important that point of view was for the sake of the story. It could have been a lot shorter, and they added a lot of unnecessary context, I feel like. Like making you feel so much invested for these, settlers that are going off to who knows where to explore. I didn't need to care that much for them. I could understand they were there to make
Sure.
it feel like it was still an important situation. The Jedi needed to save them. So,
I get it.
like that one
I think,
redhead
again,
kid.
it's just kind of setting the stakes.
The one random observation post dude who was wanting to go on a date later that night, but instead got blown up, and
Yeah.
No, the kid that Buryaga has to comfort
talk
later
to-
on.
Yeah.
That's who you meant.
Right.
Nate?
Yeah, I
Or,
did not.
Abraham.
I didn't
like
like
the-
that kid whatsoever. Like, he was just
Oh, yeah.
so unnecessary for the sake of understanding the complexities and the fact that people were on that ship and died. I didn't need to know about this one specific redhead. They didn't need to focus so much on that specific redhead.
I guess it's just
yeah,
like
that's
a an aid in that, obviously, because he appeals later on. It's just like, oh, hey, heals. When they say, oh, heals this person, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, he was on the Legacy one, so it's more of like a credibility factor than a trying to introduce you to this character factor. I don't think they care whether or not you like that character. I think it's more that they want you to know that, like, this kid was
He was there.
Yeah, he was there.
There's an attachment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true to a degree. I understand that I'm not supposed to like love this character, but I felt like there was a lot more time focused than they needed to on that character.
Maybe if they had sped up the beginning of the Legacy one, it would have felt a little bit better.
Yeah. It felt like, especially like initially, it was a very slow first chapter, I would say. So, and it felt like you were supposed to care a lot more for these characters than you ended up needing to for the sake of the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree. Like, the random pilot that was, like, has apparently been a pilot for however many years.
Like the veteran pilot or something like that, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, cool, I get it, but, like, you're gonna die regardless.
Sure.
But I don't know. I definitely, I definitely think that some of like the new old technology, I guess, from
It's all old.
this
It's a
time period was
galaxy.
pretty cool.
It's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You should,
Right.
You're doing a podcast.
Sorry. Well, I meant like even old in terms of Star Wars technology. Right. Like the weapon systems that the Jedi used for their ships and things like that. I thought that was pretty interesting, and getting to learn about some of that technology and how they actually utilize their lightsabers even more.
Right. I do think that's because the whole thing is that they talk about how, like, the lightsaber specifically, they it's like a key to actually use the weapon, and it's like, it's done this way so that a Jedi knows that they're like using the weapon that can take a life and blah blah blah. And that's a really interesting thing, but like it's only mentioned like once and it's never mentioned again, unfortunately. Like, they talk about it occasionally. They talk about how, like, the lasers are different colors for, like, different lightsabers, and that's cool, but it doesn't have all that much impact on the story.
Right. Well, I mean, and it's not like they don't explicitly say, Bell put his lightsaber into the weapon system and he thought about how it was going to blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it does specify how, like, they readied their lightsaber and they put it in the weapon system to prepare for battle.
Right.
So it's not like it just dropped it entirely. But I definitely see where you're coming from as far as they did kind of use it and then leave it,
Right.
in terms of how impactful it should have been.
I think it, at least how I interpreted it, is it was adding a sense of clarification in the sense of contrasting the Jedi of the golden age of the Jedi in the High Republic to the Jedi that we know from the prequels in particular, and showing that where a lot of them honestly have fallen from grace, and they don't take little things like that maybe into account, and and they end up being the generals of the Grand Army of the Republic,
Right.
And there's a commentary there, I think, of the fall of the Jedi and why the Jedi ended up where they end up.
I will definitely say I do think they do a great job of portraying Jedi in their quote-unquote high air, like the more quote-unquote, again, pure Jedi. It does do a great job of saying they're still very much human, have issues as being humans, but there's just something more pure about the way they go about their
Definitely.
force and them being a Jedi. Like it feels like they're trying a lot more. Like they're really actively trying to be the
They
Jedi
make the effort.
Yeah, they make the effort. Like it always makes it clear that all these people like are sad to take lives, and they're trying to do everything they can to avoid it. They're trying to keep peace at all costs, things like that. And the fact how, again, very early on when it's all the Hetzal stuff, and they're all joining together to use the Force to try to move that fuel core or whatever that was going to blow up the sun, and they were willing to sacrifice their lives to move it. I think that was really well done to show that they genuinely deem the safety of others more important than their own safety and are very self-sacrifice.
I think it's kind of either dumb or really funny how they explain that the ships they have do in fact have what's it called? Autopilot, but they don't think to activate the autopilot before they go into the sensing to save the head cell system, and then they'll die because they keep like running into each other or some shit. It's like, come on, dude. It's like just like 5 seconds think before you dedicate yourself like that, you know?
Well, so my question with that is, like, how smart is the autopilot? Because, like, sure, you can set up autopilot, but if it's just going to keep going on whatever path you'd already set up, then it's not like it's going to be that much better than not having a hand on the control stick, you know?
I would assume, though, this is all extreme high fantasy sci-fi. I would say it would be pretty easy to assume the autopilot could be smart enough to hold its own position and not crash into things.
Right. You'd hope, at least, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'd certainly hope that would be the case.
But I think that was just more there to just show that they're willing to sacrifice their lives for the sake of...
Yeah, I think it's a commentary on their willingness to do the right thing and not necessarily worry about the consequences so much as... Or, excuse me. They're so focused on trying to do the right thing that it almost blinds them.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like that's always an issue with the Jedi, though, is always... Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, doing the right thing is always important. Like, everyone should try to do the right thing as much as possible. But doing it to the detriment of, yourself and others isn't exactly a good thing at that point.
Yeah, that's fair. Again, I think that's maybe just potentially a commentary on the fact that being a Jedi is not necessarily the best thing in the world. Like, they still have their faults, even in their High Republic era where they're supposed to be at their best. They still very much have their issues.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I'm hoping for. They're going through. We could easily be over-analyzing just a simple, mistake or ignoring of a minor detail.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I do think there's a solid possibility that it is just that they are doing it just to the detriment of themselves, Like, they are just too focused on being good for their own good.
And that could be easily argued that is the fact. Even, obviously, in this era, we see issues of the Jedi. They're not perfect. They're still very much human in the sense of they have the faults of being human.
Which, of course, will always
not all
be
of
an
them are
issue.
human.
Yeah.
Right. Well, always should be an
Sentient,
issue,
yeah.
especially. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Because, you don't want, in most cases, there's certainly a place for it, but I'd argue in most cases, you do not and should not have your hero or heroes be perfect. I think they always need to have flaws in one sense or another, because otherwise they're too good and they aren't as relatable. And so I think it's important to show, but then it also, like, once we get to the prequel era, it adds context to just how much they'd kind of fallen from grace, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's, I think you may be right there, Connor, where maybe they're trying to exasperate their selflessness to show, how much they've fallen in the prequel era compared to their more higher era.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is a very good possibility that just is the case, but I don't know, it still seems unnecessary to me at times, I guess. Like, once again, goodness for the sake of goodness, I think, is a good thing, but there's absolutely...
that was a profound
can absolutely
statement.
be overdone. Thank you. You know,
That really is making me
That's what-
contemplate my theology. And my...
Do good to be good.
that's what people come to this podcast for, you know, just that super insightful theology.
Moral
of-
direction.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Glad that we can give that to the people. But once again, you know, there's absolutely a point where it's too much.
Sure. Well,
But I mean, I also have a tendency to say that, you know, like sometimes the benefit or the needs of the few do not outweigh the needs of the many, and sometimes they do.
so
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm curious to see, as you continue through this series, I'm curious to see what you end up thinking of a lot of how the characters are developed. Because there is... I mean, so I kind of say that the prequel, or we're getting contrast with the prequels and everything, but I would add that there's, within the sense of the High Republic 2, there's active commentary going on of, sure, these are kind of the shining, you know, beacons, wink wink, nudge nudge, of the galaxy, and the fact that they you know, might be almost too good is used and developed through the course of the next couple books, with some characters in particular, and the struggles that they go through, either as they mature as people or whatnot.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've always been one of those people that, like, I would never say that, like, in terms of light side versus dark side, like, if I could be a Jedi or a Sith or anything like that, like, I would be neither.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like
I
to think,
would-
at least.
Yeah, I think that the Jedi stick to too strict of a code at times, and I think that the Sith are just insane. And I don't know, it's just kind of weird dynamic within the organization itself.
Sure.
You know?
So I would argue this has always been an issue Star Wars had of very much portraying either it's a very quote-unquote good person or a very, very evil person. Like, they've definitely had some issues with the more gray areas of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, for example, Light of the Jedi showing pinnacle of pure people, to the point of their self-sacrifice is nothing if it saves another soul. But you also have the flip side where, the bad guys are always just literally the scum of the earth with nothing good about them whatsoever. They're just all insane, horrible people.
Right.
So I would argue, yeah, that's just always been a fault of Star Wars in general.
Sure. And
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree.
I think, I mean, it's something where it doesn't hurt to have gray, but I also very much feel like, especially when we're talking about fantasy or high fantasy or sci-fi fantasy, like Star Wars or similar franchises, is you do need to have that sense of good and evil to be again kind of engaged and for it to be relatable.
Sure.
So it just kind of brings to question, how gray can a person or a situation or an action be, and still be like, okay, yes, this person I think is doing the right thing. Like, there has to be some kind of commentary on if it is a gray quote unquote action, like needs of the many or few or whatever. It's important to add context, and also I think elaborate that the reason grayness for the sake of grayness isn't a good thing. I guess let me put it that way.
I got you. Like, staying on the fence isn't necessarily, or staying directly in the middle isn't always the best option in terms of, like,
it needs to be more dynamic than that.
right.
Yeah, there needs to be more. Again, like, is this person a true neutral, or are they more complex of a character than that? Like, you can't just rely on saying so and so is a gray Jedi. You need to, I think, have a struggle with that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just going to, be, well, are they going to be a good guy this book or a bad guy this,
Right. So real quick, I think we should go ahead and take a quick break. That way we can save our recordings. If anyone needs to use the bathroom, get a drink or anything along those lines. We'll be back in a minute. The Bantha Trails Podcast would like to take this time to thank its listeners for joining us and for its patience during our quick break. We hope they enjoy the rest of the podcast. All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for staying with us over that break. Now we're just going to try focusing a little bit more on the actual story and some of the more specific plot threads of the Light of the Jedi book. I know I said earlier that I was the most recent one to read it. However, I don't remember many of the major story beats other than the ship gets interrupted in hyperspace, blows up, starts sending out fragments as basically sub-light or sub-speed of light missiles across the universe, or the galaxy, I should say. So what
Well,
Can
good
you guys
news is
give me a
nailed it.
reminder?
That is the story. That is the story.
Well, so like, what are some of the other major story beats from after that point?
From
For
the
someone who maybe
disaster,
hasn't,
like in particular.
yeah, like for someone who maybe hasn't actually read it, or someone like this is their first time even hearing about the book. What are some of the big plot threads that you like stuck out to you guys? Not necessarily chronologically, but
Sure.
Probably I'd say it's split into the important bits being, I guess I should say, those the people who are reacting to the Nile and the people who are reacting to the catastrophe. Obviously later on, spoilers alert, you learn that like the Nile are behind the tragedy, but like those kind of disconnecting the people who are like actively fighting the Nile and trying to like keep them at bay, and the people who are trying to like stop the catastrophe from causing any more damage. For example, we get I want to say it's Elzal and what's her name?
I genuinely don't remember.
Avar?
Aval, yeah. They're working with the really small technology dude, and he has
The
like
Samtekas?
No, not even them. The
Kaventar.
yeah, and he's working on something to like predict where the hyperspace emergencies are coming from. That's how I feel like the book is like broken up. For lack of a better word, it's a focus between those two opposing forces, and then later on you realize that they're not as random as you might think.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, I guess one big question that I ended up having with it was, did what's his name? Rowe. Did Marcion Rowe plan for that incident to happen?
I believe it is. We all too believe that yes, he had
Yes.
specifically planned to ensure that the
Yeah.
whatever Nihil ship was going to that place would intercept with the Legacy Run.
Correct.
Does it explain in the Light of the Jedi why?
It's not full grasp on what the setup is for. More just a general, this guy doesn't like the Republic and wants to disrupt it.
And very specific to the Jedi. I think there's a line in the end of the book where he says something about how the Jedi failed his family or his people or something along those lines. So he has a personal grudge against both the Republic and the Jedi.
Which still hasn't been developed yet.
Yeah, I mean we get a little like stuff thrown our way, yeah, but nothing like big.
Not fully answered though. We don't know what this specific situation is, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right. So, Marcion Rowe then was and is the main antagonist for the entire story?
Most
as far as
definitely
aware.
As far as Phase 1 goes, which just ended, correct. He is
Definitely.
the main antagonist. Either himself directly or pulling the strings. Yeah. And it's
So-
I was just gonna add, and it's interesting to see. Again, we don't have a lot of answers on him yet, but it's interesting to see how he develops over the course of the next couple books and appearances.
Yeah.
Developing from what you're familiar with now in Light of the Jedi, and kind of building on his. Again, not necessarily spoiler, but very manipulative.
Right. Well, I mean, you can definitely tell that he's manipulative from, like, the time he's introduced.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like, if that man ever gets into a relationship, it's definitely going to be abusive.
Funny you say that.
Oh, boy. Spoiler, I guess.
Funny you mentioned.
No, yeah, I actually would say, like, he's been a very good bad guy. I've enjoyed him.
Yeah.
He's very much a secret in the sense that we still ultimately don't know his complete goal or his reasoning behind it.
We've been given so little in the way of almost, and I would say it's very intentional that they're keeping him a secret. Like, I don't think it's out of like a bad writing or anything like that.
Most
it's
definitely.
very much like keeping it secret for you. But like, you get like crumbs thrown to you, and you're happy to get them because it gives you not a whole new light, but like it's like you're making your own personal conspiracy board for the character. You know, you
Am I
get
gonna
to, like,
end up?
make connections and stuff like that.
Am I gonna end up sitting in my room with a giant board and being like?
I'm already
Possibly.
Oh, trust me, I bulk ordered red strings from Amazon.
All right, so
I 3D printed little character plaques so you can.
It's a good project.
so I guess the picture for this recording, the thumbnail is just gonna be us standing in front of the poorly photoshopped.
Excuse me.
I'm saying I want it to be poorly photoshopped.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's intentional.
Potentially looks bad.
If you insist.
No, I guess I don't understand like why he. And this might be part of the whole thing, but I don't understand why he basically got rid of one of his lieutenants.
He's consolidating
right
power.
at the end.
Yeah, specifically he is consolidating power. I don't know if they do at the end because they talk about how I think specifically it's I know their names. I do. Lorna D and Pamela. When they're at the feast at the end, they're kind of like concerned about how he's grabbing power for himself.
Right.
I don't know if don't remember fully, but they may have not done the best job of showing that. Yeah, he is very much consolidating power. He basically, as far as I can tell, like he's very much just used the Nihil to basically build his own personal army.
Yeah.
And the 3 Tempest runners were just excuse for recruiters basically.
Yeah.
And now, now he's at the point where he doesn't need them.
He gets rid of a third of his force. Like he sends an entire Tempest.
Yeah.
To go fight the Republic.
Yeah,
and
specifically to die and make it seem like the Nile aren't as dangerous as they are. They don't really explain that well either, and I honestly don't think it works as well because of how they also send all of Lorna D's forces to capture Loden. But yeah, they kind of talk about it in the next one. Basically, like the entire first half of the High Republic, the first part, is them thinking that they have the Nihil problem figured out when they very clearly don't. And that is because of them destroying the third of the forces. So they don't realize that that's not the entire Nihil force.
Right.
Gotcha.
So he gets to consolidate more power over the people he already has, and 2, he gets the Republic thinking, oh, that's that problem sewed up.
It all goes back to his like very manipulative way of like he clearly has a great grasp on what's going on, and he has well thought out all of this stuff. To the point where like all of this is part of his plan. Like he knew he was going to send all those people to die because he didn't need them anymore. He had plenty of his own army elsewhere, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and he sees them as cannon fodder. He doesn't care about them as individuals. He cares about them in the sense of what they stand for and how he can use them to further his goals.
How he can specifically benefit off of them.
Exactly.
Okay. And then, so why... Because obviously, like, the whole kidnapping thing, right? Probably the best... Maybe the second best, if not the best part of the movie.
Book.
The book, sorry.
You're good. I just...
I see it as a movie in my head,
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, that's how you know it's a good book.
Mark Thompson.
That's Mark Thompson for you. He is amazing at that kind of stuff.
But, like, the whole... He orchestrated this kidnapping to get a Jedi?
Yep.
Yeah.
What... Does it explain, I'm assuming in later books, why he needs a Jedi?
Yes.
Yes.
Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Very much so.
It's important.
Again, it's unfortunate, but a good bit of the book is setting up more books, and that has its drawbacks, obviously, but it also has its perks in that, like, when you get to those books, it's like, oh yeah, okay, this was talked about here, and
it feels
important.
cohesive and important. Yeah.
But there are faults in necessary, like the first book storytelling.
Right.
So you aren't at fault for being confused with some of this stuff. Isn't necessarily the most as clear as it could be.
Yeah.
But I mean, as we discussed earlier, I have maybe issues with how it was written in the sense of feeling very much like a part of a bigger series, which it is, but also not being its own book.
Mm-hmm.
It very much expects you to continue on with this under the assumption that if you're reading a Star Wars book, you probably will read other Star Wars books.
Those books, yeah.
I would also add Light of the Jedi is the only High Republic book so far that I've read twice, so that's also helped me get a better grasp on the story overall.
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it being my first read through and everything, I was definitely feeling very in the dark about a lot of it.
Well, good thing your next book is Into the Dark.
Yeah.
That's almost poetic.
Yeah, I suppose it is. And then, so for our listeners who are unaware, Alex and I are siblings. And so he listens along with me as I listen for the first time.
Yeah. Having also already listened to the books, but yes.
Right. One of the benefits and drawbacks to that being that a lot of the questions that I kind of ask immediately on the spot, which leads to less content for this podcast.
Because he gets an immediate answer.
Right. So I guess something that we can kind of do to remedy that, though, Alex, is can you recall any questions that I may have asked previously that maybe Nate and Connor could provide a little bit more insight on, or maybe a different opinion on?
I unfortunately really can't. Not to say that you didn't ask good questions, but you asked questions that I found easy to answer, I should say. It was very much like, oh, it's this kind of situation.
Okay. All right. Shoot, because for the life of me right now, like I said I was gonna go back and I was gonna take notes and everything like that. Never actually did. I kicking myself in the butt for that now, because now I'm like, I barely remember what even happened.
Well, I mean, again, of all of the books for that to be the case, I
That's
feel
probably the
like
best one.
this is 100%. Because again, a lot of what this is covering is broad strokes of, again, setting up the universe, giving you a general idea of what the state of the galaxy is, etc. And then the further the story continues, with books getting a lot more specific in the events that they cover, and I would certainly say it will eventually get, I would say, more important to pay attention to the events rather than just rely on the broad strokes, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Of all the
So-
books that are not remembering the exact nuances, this is probably the easiest.
Yes.
I got you. So I do remember one question that I had, and that was regarding the Jedi at the beacon, the light beacon. What was it called?
Starlight.
Beacon.
Starlight?
Yeah, Starlight Beacon. Were they like into each other?
Oh, yeah, okay. That's actually a good point.
My.
Oh, yeah. So, they kind of... That's actually you bring up a really interesting point that we haven't really had a chance to talk about, which is that, like, Jedi fuck. Like, that's like, confirmed in this book.
Well, I mean, so kind of modifying the language a little bit, yes, the Jedi are allowed to have sexual relations. I understand that the George Lucas has said that the Jedi Creed does not prevent that. It's the forming of the attachments.
Right. And what's interesting is how it's developed in the sense of, again, I guess getting back to that prior conversation on commentary and such. It's interesting to see how that is developed as a continuing thread through the story, because attachments are something that, for certain characters in particular, are very core and critical. Yeah.
So, but that doesn't necessarily answer my question as to, like, because even within, like, the Clone Wars, right, like, Obi-Wan's like, I would have flat out left the Order if you had asked me.
Yeah.
Do the Jedi care if, like, one of their members is flat out like, yo, I fell in love and I'm leaving?
I don't know if they necessarily explain that fully.
Yeah.
So, outside of the High Republic, I don't really think there's a lot of commentary. I think the closest we've gotten would probably be surrounding Count Dooku.
Oh, perhaps Ahsoka.
Well, Ahsoka's another excellent point. I think her situation's different in the sense that she was explicitly ostracized from the Jedi as compared to Dooku, who willingly left, if that makes sense. But, she's another example of what happens when a Jedi is disenfranchised either by or with the Jedi, and then figuring out what that means, and if that really changes who they are as a core person. In something that, so I mean, it's not a spoiler because you already know the situation with Elzar and Avar being a thing. It's interesting to see how I want to be careful in how I say this, but one of them relies on the other more than it's reciprocated.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's important to that individual character's story and character. And it's something that I would absolutely presume will be expanded upon even further as the story continues.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to answer your question, they do care if you get too attached. I would say, like, if they saw what was happening, the key thing being if they saw, they would definitely get involved and be like, hey, this is a problem that you should focus on. But I don't think, like, that's not anything about outright expulsion, I don't think.
So,
especially these, like, Jedi. Like, these Jedi would not expel you over something like that. They would think that they would sit you down and be like, this is a time for you to move past this stolen thing.
Right.
So then, if it's something that, like, they would expel you over, like, can Jedi get the death penalty?
I don't... From understanding, it would be almost more of an Ahsoka situation where you're expelled. You don't get executed for not following their tenets necessarily.
Yeah.
So they're just going to hope that they're going to kick you out of their order, and then after all the training and the weapons that you have, they're just going to be like, all right, don't be a bad person now. Don't
Pretty much.
Go be a Sith Lord.
It's interesting, and I won't spoil, like, too much of it, but it's interesting you point this out because there's actually a character in one of the next adult books who is a former Padawan who left the Order and straight up still has a lightsaber. Like they were just like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I see. That's the thing that I don't get. Like, they get this training, right? They learn to use the Force, and then they're just like, if you fail your trials or you do something that they don't like, and they're gonna be to the point that they say we're kicking you out. All they do is just like, all right, bye.
Yeah.
Like,
As far as where, yeah, that's pretty much all they say. It's just like,
As far as
okay,
we can
well,
tell.
that's sad that you're leaving, but we're not going to
And
do
yeah,
anything
honestly,
about
like
it.
it's yeah, that's the gist of it. It's like, yeah, no, sorry that it's come to this, but it's been fun. Good luck.
Yeah.
don't be a bad person.
Pretty
Like,
much, dude.
Yeah.
you are one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy.
I think that very much goes into like maybe a commentary on the hubris of the Jedi, where they literally are under the assumption, that no Jedi would ever turn bad.
Right, which is obviously like when you consider Dooku, very dumb, very
Oh, definitely.
Well,
foolish.
yeah, and then even further, like with Anakin.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, Anakin never really got the chance to like leave and be himself outside of the Order.
Right, but I'm saying from the standpoint of the Jedi letting something that was obviously a very,
Clear problem.
something had to have been done about it, and they didn't handle the situation well, needless to say. But again, it's all part of the commentary, so it's not like that's a bad thing.
Right.
It's just, that's how the story is told.
And there even is, if I'm not mistaken, there was a deleted scene for for Return of the Sith where Obi-Wan even talks about how he
Return?
didn't even say anything about Anakin and May and Padme.
Like
because he
it's
knew
clear
it
that
kept
he
them
knows
happy.
what's
Yeah.
going on. Yeah, but he's like, oh well, they're happy, so whatever.
And I
But
feel
thought
like,
the Jedi just weren't allowed to
canonically
have
speaking,
emotions.
in the context of the universe, that's, I feel like, important for somebody like Obi-Wan to acknowledge with him and Satine.
How do you mean?
From in the sense of, well, we know that this is something that Obi-Wan struggled with as well,
Yeah.
and it's something that he understands, being challenged by the Order to not act on that desire or urge or whatever. But again, I that's something that is just kind of a continued thread in how the Jedi handle
Situations.
interactions with and either for better or in most cases worse, how that turns out.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because it definitely, it seems like nobody's supposed to assume the Jedi are right in their way they deal with relationship. Like, even, this is, well, you won't know this yet, but there are obviously even issues with how people think the Jedi deal with relationships even in High Republic era where they're supposed to be at their best. Like, they don't really accept the fact that relationships aren't a important part of the human condition.
Right.
So I feel like, it's just a commentary on, even at their best, they still have serious issues with their hubris and just assuming that people will just ignore their cardinal desires or whatever have you, even emotional desires, for the ultimate good. For better.
And
So
really-
then-
yeah.
In your guys' opinion, if you got to be in charge of the Jedi Order, right? You can make the rules, do whatever you want. How are you setting it up? What are you doing to
change things.
how are you making it better?
I think that the bringing Kanan Jarrus into the Star Wars universe has really showed us like what it means to be a perfect Jedi. Like, it's fine to have connections if you can. And it's always like the trope with like all heroes. It's like if you can choose the greater good over your connection, then you're doing the right thing. It's less that like, oh, this is a bad thing and you should feel bad which is dumb because it's human to want these kind of connections. It's better to be like, yes, this is something everyone struggles with, but you need to be able to see the bigger picture. So I think it'd be less about teaching Jedi not to love and more about teaching them to love properly. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I concur in the sense of I don't know what else you could do. We're talking about emotions here, so there's no perfect answer. It's very subjective.
Yeah.
But the best way deal with it would probably be very much just acknowledging the fact that it's natural to have a relationship, and it's in fact important to have a good relationship, but to know that it may not be the ultimate thing in your life.
Yeah. No, should it be the most ultimate thing in your life?
Okay. What about you there, Connor?
See, that's hard for me to answer. I don't know if in the sense of how the organization is run, I don't know if I could run it. It's fundamentally like the whole monastic idea doesn't necessarily resonate with me on a lot of different levels. And so I don't know. Like I just don't necessarily feel that I can structure it honestly, any better, right? Because at its core, I think handling and recognition of attachments is obviously going to be something that a monastic order and I say monastic loosely, but an order like that has to address. I think a lot of the issue with the Jedi is that they grew a bit too big for their britches.
Yeah. Not even that, but they also centralized way too much.
Yeah,
like one of the things that really impresses me about the High Republic Jedi is how spread out they are. They explain that those Jedi outposts that routinely hold Jedi, it's not just the Jedi Temple, and 5 people in charge of the people there. In charge of the whole order, basically. Those separate temples who all basically, I mean, they probably do report to the council, but for the most part, they'll definitely
They're a lot more. I mean, not necessarily to get political, but they're out with the people that they're influencing rather than staying off separate in their own corner, disconnecting themselves from reality.
Right.
Which again, I mean, it's you need to have that real world attachment and I guess connection for it to be engaging, I think. But it's something where you need to account for the fact that it is high fantasy,
right.
And it's kind of just finding a balance, I think, without just losing the attention of everybody that's paying attention.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, I definitely understand all that, Can't say I disagree with anything that any of you have said. But I don't know. I definitely feel like there are different ways and better ways to fix the the Jedi Order, and I just don't know what they are.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think it's, I mean, again, I think it's a complicated subject, because what they are and what they should be
All probably two separate things. Two very separate
very
things.
different, I think, yeah.
And realistically, one could argue that what they want to be is unattainable.
Right.
And also not what they should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they actively almost pursue what they should not be. And they in turn forfeit, what they should be focusing on, which eventually, spoiler alert, leads to their downfall.
Yeah.
Right.
Way down the line, obviously.
A couple hundred years, yeah.
Give or take.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I think just looking back and getting a little bit of that clarification on this is the order but it's not like as any organization does, they've evolved.
And
In
changed.
the case of the Jedi, I think we can all agree they didn't evolve for the better.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty clear that. And obviously, like, we're not saying that the Sith are like to like destroy everyone or destroy all of them and like do what they did, take control of the galaxy. But it's pretty clear
Right.
that the Jedi were like failing at their job at that point in Star Wars chronology.
You can easily argue, basically, that while it's by no means the Sith were good guys, they were right in to recognize the fact that Jedis had fully failed at that point.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Well, I think, let's see. We've been going for a little over an hour now. I think as far as an episode 1 goes, I'm pretty happy with that.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, and I'm sure all answers are going to be similar, but I'm just curious. Everyone's favorite character and why? Like a brief summary. So then, keep in mind, this is just what we know of in this book, obviously.
Right.
Right.
I guess Bell. If only because as a young-ish adult, he's just the one that I would resonate with the most.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Most relatable.
Yeah.
Alex?
I would agree with Bell, but also probably more at the moment, Portal Angle. He is amazing. I love how he goes all like John Wick when he is he's like, how I can't believe you killed like an animal that was in no way harming you in any way, and then he just destroys those people. And it brings us to my favorite scene of the book, which is when that flame dog comes out of nowhere and completely scorches the dude alive. That was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the combination, the partnership of Bell and Loden.
Yeah. Pretty much that whole Jedi outpost on, I want to say Ofrona is the name of that planet?
Ufrona, yeah.
Yeah. Star Wars planet's always tricky because they spell it so weird.
And
Yeah.
this, I mean, right now, it's pretty much, sounds like we all concur. Yeah, I'm going to also agree, Bell. But I would maybe say more nuancely, specifically, especially in the first one, Bell and Loden, like, as a team, more than specifically Bell or Loden. Like, them together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, as a partnership. Yeah.
They all one of the better, and obviously we've gotten like a load of them, but one of the better Jedi Bastel Padawan combos.
Relationship-wise. Yeah, I mean, like, literally the only other pair I would even consider rivaling them is Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, I'd say.
Right. Which is funny to say, because obviously, like, there was a point in the book where Loden throws Bill off of, like, the highest tower of the Jedi Temple, and you're like, good, because he's learning, he's growing, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, for real though, we're gonna go ahead and call it here for this episode. We'd like to thank you all for joining us on the Bantha Trails here today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Once again, I have been Abraham.
I've been Alex.
Connor.
And Nathan.
We hope to see you guys next time.